Today here, we're going to do a quick little snippet on student loans and what is the average student loan for doctors. And it's a very interesting question because we get this from all walks of physician life, right? Whether someone is highly specialized, not highly specialized, whether someone is in training or medical school versus someone who's practicing. It really is a universal question. You know, for those who are out of training and working, I think they ask this question because they want to know, now that training is all done, where do they stack up student loan wise relative to their peers? It's kind of more of a comparative question. For the younger crowd, those in residency, fellowship, medical school even, it's not necessarily about comparing. They want to know what in the heck they're getting themselves into financially, right? What's a rough estimate in terms of student loans that they're going to have to take on in order to become a physician? So same question, but the perspective in which someone is viewing that really differs depending on where someone is at in their career. Okay, so that aside, to answer this question directly, it's approximately $200,000 in total debt for physicians coming out of training. Okay, and what I'm referencing here is a study done with 15,000 new doctors in 2023. And again, of those 15,000, if you look at the total reported debt that they had, the average shook out to about 200,000 across those respondents. Okay. So, of course, you feel free to stop the video, push forward from here if you're looking for just kind of a high-level bullet point. 200,000 is your answer. I don't like averages because I don't think it really speaks to the entire experience that somebody could have. So if you would like to know a little bit more, we're going to go through that. So very simply, if you look at those 15,000 physicians, 25% of them said that they had between $200,000 and $300,000 in debt. Right, so that means, obviously, 75% of respondents had either more or less, right? Either more than 300,000 or less than 200,000, that range. Now, my hunch is most of them were less than 200,000. There's probably a small portion that were north of 300. But again, just know that 75% of respondents were outside that $200,000 to $300,000 range. Okay, so what's another way we can think about this? This is real life data, right, from these 15,000 new physician respondents. What we did, though, is pulled actual tuition data for all medical schools in the country to just get a feel for what that was. And then for you, the listener, you can maybe extrapolate that a little bit up, depending on the track you're on, if you're still in training or medical school, in what you might expect from a tuition standpoint, and how that ultimately filters up, obviously, to total student loans. And interestingly, you can kind of cut this a few different ways, right? Whether someone is an MD or DO matters. Whether you are in-state or out-of-state will matter for tuition. And finally, whether you go to a public institution or a private institution. All right, so let's take a look at this. I'm going to flash this up on the screen here so you can see what I'm seeing. But if you look at medical doctors, right, we look at the public sector. For in-state MD public, you're looking at about $42,000 per year on average for tuition cost for that institution. And then out-of-state public MD, you're looking at just over $67,000 per year, right? So that is what, 40, 50, 60, 70? You're looking at almost a $30,000 per year swing on average, right? Median cost versus in-state, out-of-state on the public side, right? That's meaningful. Obviously, there's an advantage to being in-state in that respect. As you might expect, on the private side, that distinction virtually disappears, right? Whether you are in-state or out-of-state on the private side doesn't really matter. The average per year tuition cost is approximately $70,000 per year, right? So big difference between public-private, and then within public, in-state versus out-of-state. Of interest as well, just the highs and lows here. On the in-state side, right, if you look at the absolute low end, the lowest tuition we found was $19,500 per year in-state. And on the absolute high end in-state, it was just over $80,000. On the out-of-state side, there was a freak outlier in which the low was actually $4,300 per year out of state. Amazingly low. And on the high end, as you'd expect, a bit higher than in-state, but it was pushing 100,000. It was about 96,500 per year in out-of-state tuition on the high end. So hopefully that gives a good kind of like breakdown on the median side for MDs. And of course, depending on the track you're on, in-state, out-of-state, public, private, you can extrapolate that up, 4 years of medical school to kind of get a rough idea of what total tuition is going to cost and how that, if you're borrowing all that, obviously what student loans are going to be. On to DO. We don't have the averages for public, private, and out-of-state for DO, but we do have the highs and lows. And on the DO side, right, for in-state, the lowest cost in 2023 was just under 20,000, 19,700, and the high end it was just over 81,000. On the out-of-state side, it was 33,000 on the low end, and on the high end, again, 81,000. So a little less data on the DO side, but just a fairly healthy range there, and that doesn't differ a whole lot from the MD side, at least on the high-low range of things. Okay, a few caveats here. Number one, on the tuition side that we just went through, keep in mind that is just tuition, right? Most of the physicians that we work with, when they borrowed money during medical school, they borrowed for tuition and living expenses. So this gets you to a good kind of barometer on tuition, but of course, you just don't want to forget to add in living expenses to the extent that would be something you would need as well. And that's obviously going to raise the total debt load. Number two, debt. No one likes it. It's scary. These are big numbers. All understandable responses to just debt in general. But I will say this: if you are considering medicine, don't let these numbers scare you, right? Because at least with all the physicians we work with, for the debt that they have, it is all very manageable for them relative to all their other financial goals as soon as training is done, right? The other piece of this too is how you handle this debt matters significantly in residency and fellowship. If there's one takeaway, it's you've got to address this during training. You will save yourself a ton of money by getting a plan in place then. There are many programs that will reduce or eliminate some of this debt completely. And in order for a physician to take advantage of those programs, you've got to get ahead of that and address it during training. My wife's a physician. Her and I could kick myself to this day, made a mistake in the early part of training that essentially added on another half year's worth of payments for us when she was done with training. It was a dumb mistake, and something of course I learned from and passed on to clients. But you just want to avoid those silly mistakes, right? Because it's going to end up costing money, and it costs us money. So again, don't be scared by debt. This gives a good high-level estimate on what debt is, what to expect, depending on public-private, MD versus DO, in-state, out-of-state, and kind of just rough averages on total debt for 2023, graduating class at least. And otherwise, these are great years. And outside of the debt, it's time to be enjoyed, and the debt is very manageable as time goes on. Thank you.